The first heavy snow of the season arrived before the valley was ready for it. By the time the storm clouds covered the mountains, the frontier settlement had already begun closing its doors, pulling livestock closer, and preparing for the long months when the wilderness became less forgiving. But the cold was not the only thing changing the valley. For weeks, iron traps had appeared along the edges of the forest and near the old animal trails. They were large, brutal devices built to catch wolves, but they did more than remove predators. They disturbed the balance of the land, forcing frightened animals into unfamiliar paths and turning the quiet wilderness into a place ruled by fear. Anya had been the only person willing to interfere. At 20 years old, she had learned the language of the valley through years of watching rather than taking. She understood the difference between an animal that hunted and an animal that was desperate. She knew how the wind carried unfamiliar scents, how tracks changed after snowfall, and how silence itself could reveal danger. To Garrett, those skills meant nothing. He saw the young woman as someone standing between him and what he wanted. Every trap she destroyed cost him time and money, and every warning she gave reminded the town that his methods were creating problems he refused to acknowledge. So he decided to make an example of her. The people of the settlement gathered near Garrett's property when they saw what he had done. Behind a reinforced wooden fence stood a large enclosure originally built to hold a captured wolf. Inside it was Anya. The sight was meant to frighten everyone watching. A young woman alone inside a cage designed for a predator was supposed to prove that Garrett controlled the situation. It was supposed to show that anyone who challenged him would eventually be powerless. But the reaction he expected never came. Anya did not spend her first moments searching for a way to escape. She did not waste energy fighting the fence or giving Garrett the satisfaction of seeing her panic. Instead, she studied the animal beside her. The gray wolf had been caught several days earlier. One of its legs carried the damage of an iron trap, and every movement revealed pain hidden beneath its anger. Its body was tense, its breathing uneven, and its eyes moved constantly between the people outside the enclosure and the unfamiliar surroundings around it. Anya understood what the others did not. The wolf was not preparing to attack because it wanted blood. It was reacting because it had been hurt, trapped, and surrounded. That difference mattered. While the crowd saw a dangerous beast, Anya saw a living creature trying to survive a situation it did not understand. She kept her distance, controlled her movements, and allowed the animal to recognize that she was not another threat. The storm clouds continued moving closer, bringing colder air down from the mountains. No one in the crowd noticed the rider arriving at the edge of town. Cole had come to sell horses and resupply before returning to his isolated ranch beyond the valley. He was not looking for trouble. After years of walking away from conflicts created by other men, he had built a life around keeping his distance from them. But distance became impossible when he saw the enclosure. Cole had seen cruelty before. He had witnessed what happened when powerful people convinced themselves that control was the same as protection. He had spent years carrying the weight of choices made by men who believed their authority gave them the right to decide who belonged and who did not. The scene in front of him carried the same feeling. A person with power had created a situation where fear was supposed to replace understanding. What stopped Cole was not Garrett's cruelty. It was Anya's response to it. She was trapped beside an injured predator, yet she was the calmest person there. That moment reminded Cole of something he had spent years trying to forget. There had been times in his past when he had stood close enough to injustice to recognize it, but not brave enough to stop it sooner. He had left that life behind, abandoned the uniform, and chosen a quieter existence. But the memory of those moments had followed him. Watching Anya refuse to become afraid made him realize that silence had a cost too. The people around the enclosure saw a dangerous wolf and a reckless girl. Cole saw a person being punished for protecting something that could not protect itself. Before the storm arrived completely, he made his choice. He moved toward the enclosure. Garrett had built the trap, believing that fear would make people obey. He did not understand that some people became stronger when they had something worth protecting. And before the night ended, Cole would open the cage that was never meant to be opened. The storm reached the valley before Cole reached the enclosure. Snow began cutting across the open ground, turning the town's streets into narrow paths of ice and making every movement slower. Most people watched from a distance, unwilling to become part of whatever conflict was forming between Garrett's authority and the man walking toward the cage. Cole knew exactly what kind of man Garrett was. Not because they had met before, but because Cole had spent years around men who believed that strength came from controlling everything around them. They used weapons, uniforms, and fear to create obedience. They convinced themselves that order and domination were the same thing. Cole had once been closer to that world than he wanted to admit, but he had left it. When he reached the enclosure, he did not approach like a gunman looking for a fight. He studied the lock, the structure of the fence, and the position of the injured wolf. He understood that one careless movement could turn the animal's pain into panic. That was the difference between him and Garrett. One man saw a problem that needed to be destroyed. The other saw a situation that needed to be understood. Cole created an opening in the enclosure while keeping attention away from Anya and the wolf. The moment the gate gave way, Anya moved with the same careful control she had shown before. She did not rush past the animal. She did not treat the wolf as an obstacle between herself and freedom. She moved as if the creature beside her had a reason for every reaction. The escape was brief but dangerous. Garrett's men tried to stop them, but the worsening storm forced everyone to choose between chasing two people and protecting themselves from the freezing weather. Cole used the confusion to guide Anya away from the settlement and toward the trail leading into the mountains. By the time they reached the edge of the valley, the town had disappeared behind a wall of snow. Anya remained silent and watchful. Cole understood why. Trust was not something that appeared because someone offered help. For someone who had spent her life watching powerful people take what they wanted, kindness from a stranger could easily look like another form of control. So Cole did not ask for gratitude. He did not demand explanations. He simply gave her space to decide what she believed. The journey to his ranch took several hours. The storm covered their tracks, but it also slowed their horses and drained their strength. Along the way, Anya noticed details that revealed the kind of man Cole was. He repaired damaged equipment instead of replacing it. He avoided unnecessary harm when crossing difficult terrain. He treated his horse like a partner rather than a tool. Those small choices told her more than any explanation could have. When they finally reached the ranch, the place looked nothing like the settlements Anya had known. It was not built to conquer the land. The wooden house, the stable, and the surrounding fields existed alongside the wilderness instead of trying to erase it. The ranch was isolated, but not empty. There was evidence of patience everywhere. Cole had built a life around maintaining what he had, instead of taking more than he needed. For the first night, Anya stayed because the storm made leaving impossible. Not because she trusted him. Not yet. Cole understood that difference. He prepared a place for her to rest, provided food and warmth, and kept his distance. He did not treat her like someone who needed to be owned or protected from herself. That alone separated him from many people she had encountered. As the storm continued outside, Anya studied the ranch from the window and noticed something unusual. There were no large fences cutting the land into pieces. There were no rows of traps waiting beneath the snow. There was no evidence that Cole wanted to force nature into submission. The man who had carried a weapon for years seemed to have built a life without needing one. But Anya did not know the full story yet. She did not know about the uniform hidden away in his past. She did not know about the battles he had walked away from. And Cole did not know that the young woman he had rescued was connected to the very history he had spent years trying to escape. Outside, the snow buried the road back to town. Inside, two people shaped by different wounds found themselves sharing the same shelter. Neither of them understood yet that the storm had not only separated them from Garrett, it had placed them directly in the path of everything they had both been running from. The storm passed after 3 days, but winter remained. Snow covered the valley in a thick white layer, hiding old trails and forcing every living thing to adapt. For most people, the frozen landscape represented isolation. For Anya, it was a different kind of language. The snow did not erase the world. It revealed it. Every movement left a mark. Every disturbance told a story. During her first days at Cole's ranch, Anya watched before she acted. She learned the rhythm of the place, the way the horses responded to the changing weather, the areas where the ground stayed firm beneath the snow, and the places where animals avoided passing. Cole noticed that she studied everything. At first, he assumed she was simply trying to understand her surroundings, so she could leave safely when the weather improved. But as the days passed, he began to see that Anya was not searching for an escape route. She was learning the land. That was something Cole respected. His own life had been built on learning the same lessons in a different way. He knew how to repair fences after a storm, how to judge the condition of a horse by the way it moved, and how to keep a small ranch alive when resources were limited. Anya understood things he had never been taught. Cole understood things she had never needed to learn. Their differences slowly became useful instead of dividing them. When one of the ranch horses became restless near the northern pasture, Cole first believed the animal had sensed a predator nearby. The tracks in the snow seemed to support that possibility. A large animal had crossed the area during the night, moving close enough to disturb the herd. But Anya noticed something else. The tracks were not from a hunting animal searching for prey. They showed hesitation. The creature had moved around the pasture instead of toward it. Anya followed the trail farther than Cole expected and found the reason. The animal had been avoiding the scent of several new traps hidden near the tree line. Garrett had continued placing them beyond the settlement. He was no longer simply trying to remove wolves. He was changing the movement of every creature in the valley. The discovery changed how Cole viewed the situation. Before Anya arrived, he had considered Garrett's actions another example of human greed, something ugly but familiar. He had seen men damage land for profit before. But this was different. Garrett was creating a chain of problems that would eventually affect everyone living in the valley, including the people who believed they benefited from his methods. Anya did not celebrate being proven right. She focused on what needed to be done. She helped Cole identify safer areas for the livestock, locate damaged sections of fencing, and understand how the animals were reacting to the pressure spreading through the valley. For the first time in years, Cole allowed someone else's knowledge to influence decisions that affected his home. That choice mattered more than he expected. Cole had spent much of his life being responsible for protecting others. During his years near the border conflicts, his value had been measured by how well he followed orders and how quickly he could respond to danger. At the ranch, he had chosen a quieter life, but quiet had sometimes become another form of distance. Anya reminded him that protecting something did not always mean standing in front of it with a weapon. Sometimes it meant paying attention. Sometimes it meant admitting someone else could see what he could not. Their trust grew through small moments. When Anya adjusted the way the horses were being handled during the colder mornings, Cole followed her advice. When Cole showed her how to repair broken equipment and maintain the ranch through winter, Anya applied those lessons with the same patience she brought to everything else. Neither of them tried to change the other. They simply began making room for another way of seeing the world. Outside the ranch, Garrett continued searching for the woman who had escaped him. He expected fear to bring her back. He expected isolation to weaken Cole. Instead, the two people he considered obstacles were becoming stronger because they were learning from each other. That was the mistake Garrett did not understand. He believed power came from making others smaller. Cole and Anya were discovering that strength could also come from trust. The first real warning arrived near the end of the week. Anya found a set of tracks deeper in the forest, larger than the others she had followed before. The marks showed the movement of a powerful animal that had been injured but was still surviving. The same wolf that had once been trapped near Garrett's property was still alive, but it was no longer moving like an ordinary predator. Something had changed. The traps, the pursuit, and the damage caused by Garrett's choices had pushed the animal into unfamiliar territory. Anya understood the danger immediately. The problem was no longer one injured wolf. The problem was a valley where every creature was being forced into survival mode. And when nature was pushed too far, it always found a way to answer. The days after the first signs of imbalance in the valley passed quietly, but the quiet did not mean peace. Winter had a way of hiding problems before revealing them. Snow covered broken branches, buried old tracks, and softened the evidence of what had happened beneath the surface. To anyone passing through the valley, Cole's ranch looked untouched, but Anya knew better. She had learned that the land always remembered. The animals remembered where danger appeared. The snow remembered where people walked. The forests remembered every wound left behind. That was why she noticed the old storage room beneath the ranch house. Cole rarely entered the room. It was not abandoned, but it carried the feeling of something deliberately left behind. The door remained closed most of the time, and the few times Anya had passed by, she noticed that Cole's attention changed whenever he looked in that direction. Not fear, something heavier. One afternoon, while helping organize supplies before the next storm arrived, Anya opened the room, looking for equipment that could be used to repair damaged sections of the barn. Inside were the remains of another life. Old maps, worn leather equipment, a faded military coat, and beneath a wooden board near the back wall, a locked metal container covered by years of dust. The contents inside changed everything. Anya found a rifle wrapped carefully in cloth. The weapon had been maintained, but it had not been used in years. Beside, it was an old military insignia connected to the same forces that had once pushed into the lands of her people. For a long moment, she stood still. The discovery was not only about an object. It was about the meaning behind it. The same kind of weapon had existed on the other side of the history she carried. The same symbol represented the people who had arrived, believing that another person's home could become their own, simply because they had the power to take it. The man she had begun trusting was connected to that world. When Cole returned to the house and saw what she had found, he immediately understood why the air between them had changed. He did not try to hide the past. He did not pretend the uniform and rifle belonged to someone else. Cole had once worn that uniform. He had once traveled with men who believed they were bringing order to a changing frontier. At first, he had convinced himself that his role was only to follow orders and keep roads safe. But over time, he saw what was happening around him. The missions were not always about protection. The promises made to communities were not always kept. The people in power were not always interested in peace. Eventually, Cole reached a point where remaining silent became a choice he could no longer accept. He had walked away before he became part of the worst actions carried out by others, but leaving did not erase what he had witnessed. That was the burden he carried, not the belief that he was innocent. The knowledge that he had once stood close enough to injustice to know it was happening. Anya did not see only the man standing in front of her. She saw every person who had carried a weapon under that symbol, every family forced away from land they had known for generations, every promise broken by people who believed power gave them permission. The trust she had slowly built with Cole did not disappear because she suddenly hated him. It broke because she had allowed herself to believe he was completely separate from the history that had hurt her. Cole understood that pain. He understood that no explanation could remove the meaning of what she had found. The truth between them became heavier than either of them expected. For Anya, staying meant accepting a connection she was not ready to forgive. For Cole, asking her to stay would mean doing the same thing he regretted most about his past, taking away someone else's choice because he believed he knew what was best. So he did the only thing he could. He let her decide. The next morning, Anya prepared to leave. The storm outside had not fully passed. The roads were dangerous, and the wilderness offered no guarantees. But remaining at the ranch felt impossible while she carried the weight of what she had discovered. She packed only what she needed. Cole watched without trying to stop her. That choice hurt more than any argument could have, because Anya realized that he was not protecting himself from rejection. He was respecting her freedom, and that made the situation even harder. She had expected excuses. She had expected denial. She had expected him to defend the past because it was connected to him. Instead, he accepted that some wounds could not be healed by explanation alone. Anya left the ranch as snow began falling again. The same valley that had brought them together now separated them. Behind her was the first place where she had begun to imagine trust. Ahead of her was uncertainty. And behind Cole was the knowledge that doing the right thing sometimes meant allowing someone to walk away, even when every part of him wanted to ask them to stay. Neither of them knew that the storm moving across the mountains was carrying something far more dangerous than cold air. Garrett was still hunting. The injured wolf was still alive. And the choices made in the past were moving toward a moment when everyone in the valley would have to face the consequences. The valley became quieter after Anya left the ranch. Not peaceful, quiet in the way the wilderness became quiet before a storm. Cole returned to the routines that had carried him through years of isolation. He repaired fences, checked the livestock, and prepared the ranch for the worsening weather. His hands continued working, but his mind remained with the choice Anya had made. He understood why she left. That was what made it harder. Cole had spent years believing that carrying guilt was the same as taking responsibility, but watching Anya walk away forced him to understand something he had avoided for a long time. A person could regret the past and still have to accept that others were allowed to judge it. He could not demand forgiveness simply because he had changed. Outside the ranch, Garrett continued moving through the valley with a different kind of certainty. He believed the problem had always been simple. The wolves were the threat. The people who questioned him were the threat. Anything he could not control was something that needed to be removed. The injured gray wolf became the next target. Garrett found its tracks near the northern woods, following the signs left behind by the damaged trap. The animal had survived longer than he expected, but it was weaker now. The iron trap had slowed it, and the pain had changed the way it moved through the valley. To Garrett, the wounded animal was proof that his methods worked. He never considered that the suffering he created was the reason the danger existed. When he reached the wolf, he did not see an animal trapped by human actions. He saw a final obstacle. His decision made the situation worse. The old trap was damaged, the wolf was injured, and the pressure that had been building throughout the valley finally reached a breaking point. The storm arrived that evening. Snow swept across the mountains with enough force to hide roads, bury tracks, and isolate anyone caught outside. The same weather that had once protected Anya and Cole from Garrett now trapped every person in the valley with the consequences of their choices. At Cole's ranch, the first signs appeared before nightfall. The horses became restless. The livestock gathered closer together. The sounds coming from the forest changed. Cole recognized the warning. Something was moving toward the ranch. Not because the animals were hunting, because they were searching for safety. The realization changed everything. The wolves were not attacking the valley. The valley had pushed them there. Far away from the ranch, Anya had reached the edge of the wilderness where she intended to continue alone. She had spent the last hours fighting against memories she had tried to leave behind. She thought about Cole's rifle. She thought about the symbol attached to it. She thought about every reason she had to keep walking away. But she also remembered something else. Cole had opened a door without asking her to stay. He had helped her without demanding trust. He had given her a choice when another man would have taken one away. That difference mattered. Anya had spent much of her life recognizing people who wanted to control the world around them. Cole was different because he had learned to control himself. When she saw the signs of the approaching wolves and understood that Cole's ranch sat directly in their path, she made her decision. She turned back. Not because she needed shelter, not because she had nowhere else to go. She returned because she chose to. The journey back was slow and dangerous. The snow reached deeper with every hour. The wind made familiar paths disappear. The cold tested every movement. But Anya knew the valley better than most people, and she followed the signs others would have missed. Broken branches, disturbed snow, the movement of animals trying to escape danger. Everything pointed toward the same place, Cole's ranch. By the time she reached the ridge above the property, she saw what had gathered below. The fences were surrounded. The storm had turned the ranch into a place where every force in the valley had collided. Garrett's men were there too, searching for safety after the weather destroyed their ability to continue the hunt. The man who had spent so long trying to control the wilderness was now trapped inside the consequences of his own decisions. Anya looked toward the ranch house. She could see Cole moving through the snow, preparing to protect the people and animals inside. For a moment, the distance between them represented everything that had happened. The trust they built. The truth she discovered. The pain that separated them. Then the wind carried another sound across the valley. A wounded animal. A desperate warning. The same wolf that had been trapped by Garrett was approaching the ranch. And Anya understood that the final conflict was not about defeating the wolf. It was about deciding whether anyone in the valley had truly learned from the damage they had caused. The storm grew stronger. The night became colder. And the ranch that had once been a place of refuge became the place where every choice would finally be tested. The storm reached its worst point after midnight. The valley disappeared beneath a wall of snow and wind. The mountains, the forests, and the distant roads were swallowed by darkness, leaving only the small circle of light around Cole's ranch. Inside that circle, every person faced the consequences of their choices. Cole had spent his life preparing for danger. He knew how to handle a frightened horse, how to survive harsh winters, and how to defend a home when there was nowhere else to retreat. But this was different. The danger outside was not something that could be defeated by force. The animals surrounding the ranch were not an invading enemy. They were desperate. The same land that Garrett had tried to control was now reacting to years of pressure placed upon it. The fences shook beneath the weight of the wind. The horses moved nervously inside the stable. The livestock gathered together, sensing something beyond human understanding. Then the first wolves appeared through the snow. They moved carefully around the edges of the ranch, not charging forward, but searching. Among them was the injured gray wolf. The iron trap still hung from its leg. Every step carried pain. Every movement showed the damage caused by a device meant to solve a problem that had never been understood. Garrett saw the animal and reached for the weapon he trusted more than anything else. Fear returned to his decisions. He believed that if he destroyed the largest threat, everything would return to order. But the more he reacted, the less control he had. His shots disappeared into the storm. The noise frightened the animals, scattered the livestock, and created more chaos than it prevented. The man who had built his life around controlling the wilderness finally revealed the weakness behind his belief. He understood power. He did not understand balance. Cole saw what was happening. For a moment, the old instinct returned. The rifle was familiar in his hands. The weight of it reminded him of another life, another time, another version of himself. A version of himself that believed every problem could be solved by stopping whatever stood in front of him. But that man had already taken enough from him. Enough memories. Enough peace. Enough years. Cole lowered the weapon. Instead, he moved toward the danger in a different way. He used rope, patience, and experience from years working with animals. He created space between the wounded wolf and the people around him, keeping the animal focused on him while giving Anya the opening she needed. When Anya reached the ranch, she saw the scene from the edge of the storm. Cole was standing between the wolf and everyone else. Not attacking it, not trying to defeat it, holding the line. That was the moment she understood something about him that the rifle in the storage room had hidden. Cole was not defined by the weapon he once carried. He was defined by the choice he made when he no longer needed to carry it. She moved through the snow toward him. The cold had already begun taking strength from every person outside. Her hands felt heavier with each passing minute. The storm made every movement uncertain, and the darkness made the injured animal seem larger than it was. But Anya knew what she was facing. The wolf was not protecting aggression. It was protecting itself from more pain. She approached slowly. Every step required patience. Every movement had to communicate that she was not another threat. The animal watched her. Its breathing remained heavy. The trap continued cutting into its leg. The pain had transformed a frightened creature into something everyone feared. But Anya saw the creature beneath the fear, the same way she had seen it inside Garrett's enclosure, the same way she had seen the truth beneath Cole's past. The snow covered her hands as she reached the injured leg. Her fingers had begun losing feeling. The metal was frozen. The mechanism was damaged. The trap had been designed to hold, not to release. Behind her, the storm continued tearing through the ranch. Beside her, Cole's injury reopened as he fought to maintain control of the situation. The blood from his wound fell onto the snow. The scent spread through the cold air, drawing the attention of other animals moving beyond the fence. Time was disappearing. Anya worked against the freezing metal. The trap resisted. Her strength weakened. The wolf reacted to the pain and shifted suddenly. For one moment, everything depended on what happened next. If fear won, the animal would attack. If panic won, the people around them would respond with violence. But Anya remained still. She did not fight the wolf. She fought the thing hurting it. With one final movement, the damaged mechanism gave way. The iron trap released. The change was immediate. The animal pulled its injured leg free and stepped back. For the first time since it had been caught, the wolf was no longer fighting against something attached to its body. It stood in the snow, breathing heavily, surrounded by the people who had expected it to become a monster. Anya remained where she was. She did not reach for it. She did not demand trust. She simply allowed the animal to make its own choice. The wolf looked at her. Then it looked toward the forest. The silence that followed felt larger than the storm. The animal turned away. Slowly, the other wolves followed. The pack disappeared into the white darkness, leaving only tracks behind them. The storm continued, but the fear that had controlled the valley was gone. Garrett stood among the damaged fences and broken plans, surrounded by the evidence of everything he had failed to understand. The wilderness had never needed to be conquered. It had only needed to be respected. And the people who had survived the night finally understood that the greatest danger had never been the wolf beneath the iron trap. It had been the belief that everything living could be controlled. Part 7. The Open Door. The storm did not disappear all at once. It faded slowly, leaving behind a valley transformed by everything that had happened. The snow remained deep across the land, but the violence of the wind had passed. For the first time in days, the mountains could be seen again. The morning revealed the cost of the night. Fences had been damaged. The ranch had suffered losses. The people who had survived the storm carried injuries, exhaustion, and the uncomfortable knowledge that the danger they feared had never been what they believed. The wolves had not destroyed the valley. They had exposed what had already been damaged. Garrett's actions could no longer be ignored. The The broken traps scattered across the surrounding land became evidence of what he had done. The injuries caused to the animals, the danger created for the ranches, and the consequences of disturbing the natural balance were no longer rumors or warnings from people he dismissed. They were visible. They were undeniable. The same methods Garrett had used to create control had created the proof that eventually turned people against him. The community that once accepted his confidence began seeing the difference between protection and destruction. Garrett had spent years convincing others that fear was necessary. The storm showed them that fear had been the problem all along. Afterward, the valley began the slow process of rebuilding. The damaged fences were repaired. The unnecessary traps were removed. The land was allowed time to recover. No one believed the winter would become easy. Frontier life never worked that way. But the people who remained understood something they had forgotten. Survival was not always about forcing the world to obey. Sometimes it was about learning how to live within it. For Cole, the changes were more personal. The night with the wolf had not erased his past. The old rifle still existed. The memories still existed. The harm he had witnessed could not be undone. But for the first time in many years, Cole no longer believed that carrying guilt was the only way to honor what had been lost. He had spent years trying to prove he was not the same man he had once been. Anya had shown him something different. He did not need to spend the rest of his life running from the past. He needed to continue choosing what kind of person he would be. Anya stayed near the valley for several days after the storm, not because she had forgotten what Cole's past represented, not because the pain connected to that history had disappeared. Some wounds were not meant to vanish. They were meant to be understood. She watched Cole rebuild the ranch the same way he had always lived, with patience, with responsibility, with respect for things that could not be owned. That was what finally changed the way she saw him. Cole had never asked the land to forgive him. He had spent years proving through action that he wanted to protect what remained. And that was the same choice he had offered her. Freedom. When spring was still far away and the valley remained covered in winter, Anya reached the moment she had been avoiding since the day she arrived. She had to decide whether the ranch was only a temporary shelter or something more. Cole did not make that decision for her. He did not ask her to stay because he needed her. He did not ask her to stay because she had nowhere else to return. The door of the ranch remained open. The choice remained hers. Anya looked toward the forest beyond the valley. That wilderness had shaped her. It had taught her patience, awareness, and respect. It would always be part of who she was. But belonging was not about choosing one world and rejecting another. For the first time, she understood that she did not have to disappear into the wilderness to remain true to herself. She could choose a place where her knowledge mattered, where her choices mattered, where she was seen as more than a problem to be controlled. Anya stepped toward the ranch house. The same doorway that had once represented temporary shelter now represented something different. Not a cage, not a possession, a choice. And when she crossed that threshold, she did so because she wanted to. Behind her was the endless forest. Ahead of her was a life she had chosen. The valley remained wild. The storms would return. The winters would still be harsh. But within that small ranch, surrounded by mountains and snow, two people who had spent years carrying the weight of the past finally found something neither of them had been able to create alone, a place where they could belong without losing who they were.